Welcome, dear digital ship friends. We are opening the door to our webinar on compliance with IMO 2021 cybersecurity rules. We prepared this webinar together with Port IT, who is also sponsoring this webinar. We have three great speakers here with us who are true cybersecurity experts in Europe. I'm very glad to introduce you to Lichthardt, CEO at Port IT, Mark Lichthardt, co-founder of SecWatch, and Dave Maslan, CEO of Ais Attack. Use this opportunity to ask your questions, simply typing them to the Q&A box. And we are starting off with Carl Jeffrey, founding editor of Digital Ship, with some short reminder to us all what IMO cybersecurity guidelines are.
Okay, thank you, Vida. So the topic is compliance with the IMO 2020 rules on cybersecurity. So we'll start with what the rules are. They say they require ship owners and managers to assess cyber risk and implement relevant measures. So you can already see the term compliance is quite difficult. Your big concern as a shipping company is going to be that someone's going to come on board, do an audit and find deficiencies, and you don't specifically know what they're going to look for or what they're going to ask about. So we've heard there've already been some inspections on ships. So our first speaker, Lichthardt, is going to share some experiences he's heard about from IMO 2020 inspections and how to set about compliance at a high level. And I think he's also going to tell you that if the ship has a managed cybersecurity service provider, that might deflect some of the questions from the auditor onto the provider. So Yuri is CEO of Port IT. That's a maritime security consultancy in the Netherlands, and he's been working in maritime digital technology for 22 years. So after that, we're going to get into more depth about how to assess cyber risk and implement relevant measures, and also being able to demonstrate that you've done it to an auditor. So it seems like there's a consensus that the biggest risks on ships are phishing attacks, which can lead to viruses, which can lead to ransomware. We're going to hear from Dave Masland, who's CEO of Ais Attack, who's a internet security company. So he's going to talk about the maritime threat landscape as he sees it and the impact it has on the industry and how to act. I think this is very, very useful because actually you're getting a sensible idea about what the threats actually are and what they aren't, I think is something that's often missing here. So that should be very interesting. Then we're going to hear from Mark Lichthardt, who's co-founder of SecWatch. They're a penetration testing company also in the Netherlands. So penetration testing is when you pay a company to try and hack you basically and see if they can get in. So he's going to talk about some of the threats he's seen and how penetration testing can be an important part of identifying the risks. So as usual, you can put the questions in the Q&A box anytime. We should have plenty of time for questions from the audience after the presentations, and you can upvote other people's questions. I know cybersecurity events sometimes get more questions than any other webinars we've had. So you can see the questions other people have entered. And I'd like to invite Yuri to give the opening talk. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Carl, for the introduction. Thank you all for joining. We will speak about the basically getting done with the IMO 2021. So first, briefly, I want to discuss what the costs are of a vessel, because often people look at the cost of a cybersecurity implementation to get to the compliance level. And a takeaway of that is compliance will get automatically when IT and cybersecurity is done well. But a cyber incident and at a port stay in Rotterdam, an additional day in port will cost a company quickly $50,000. And that can be because the vessel can't sail out due to any kind of reason. An engineering cost to have an engineer on board, excluding the travel time, can be $1,500 a day, depending on the time of day, night time, and all that kind of stuff. If you compare that to your average cybersecurity cost, it's actually much lower. So the return on investment is already really quick on those kind of solutions. And if we then go to the threat landscape, we see the threats. It's like we have seen in our security operating center around 600,000 plus different threats being detected by our systems. And well, one of the most found viruses is actually a 15-year-old virus. So it's not that the newest threats appear only on the vessels, also still old threats do appear very often.
Yuri, I'm sorry, can you launch your slides? We don't see them yet.
You don't see them?
Not yet.
Strange. Okay, where's you see them now, right?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. I was here. Sorry about that. So ransomware is really a threat that we have in the market at the moment. We see that of a data set of 1,500 vessels, 750 vessels basically got an attack of some kind of ransomware. That was luckily blocked in all those cases, but it is an issue happening on all the vessels. So if we then look to the IMO 2021, which is basically based on the NIST framework, and we have seen these bullets, these 5 points, pillars, how you want to name it, well, I think too often in the last couple of months, but it gives you an insight of how to get to that compliance level. Again, Dave will zoom a bit more on it, so I will not spend too much time on all the identify and protect. But when you cover everything correctly, you have a fail-safe plan to go back to eventually. One of the most important parts to know actually, and I was just telling as well to the team, is if you work with a managed security service provider, it will result in cost saving. I myself just attended a webinar last week, and one of the security researchers said, well, don't be a candy company doing cybersecurity. You can't learn cybersecurity in a day or in a week. It will take you time to learn that. And that's basically the same as Port IT would have said, okay, we will be a shipping company. We will not be a shipping company in a day and not in a month. It will take us years. And that's the same for these kind of trainings and knowledge to get to a certain knowledge level. So you can benefit from the expertise of those companies to leverage on what they have learned on the last couple of years and see what they see in the threat landscape. So, but what do we see in our customers basically when they get an inspection? Well, we have some customers that had an inspection and the questions are still very basic, like, do you manage your network yourself? How many computers do you have on the vessel? Do you have an antivirus solution? And so on. So they're basic, but they will get more complicated when this regulation evolves during the time. But when the auditor noticed there is a security partner actually managing the IT for the vessel, it's, are you managing the network? They call us or they call another company and they can hand over a document. And then it's actually the audit is very quickly done. And that most likely has to do with the fact that the knowledge level of the auditor of IT and the provider managing all the IT is way more, how do you call it, different and higher. The knowledge gap is higher, so they can't ask many questions that can be really difficult because they can get difficult questions back. So all the inspections that have been done when there was an IT party actually managing the vessel were very short, and the compliance level was really in the compliance, or the audit was very quickly completed. Just briefly on the types of solutions that we see in the market, and sure, IMO is more than only solutions. It's also risk management, risk assessment, and so on. But it's all start with awareness as well. Awareness is basically the live buoy. If you jump in the water with a live buoy, at least you will be safe for some period of time. And if you have an antivirus, it's your lifeboat. You will also survive. But you can upgrade that with an engine, basically saying, okay, I get an endpoint security that also monitors what comes in from the network to the machine and leaves from the machine. So again, a step bigger, higher. With UTM, basically you can see what everything comes into the network and goes out to the network. So again, one step higher. And if you want to do a full suite, you can add NDR, so basically the most advanced lifeboat. And then you can also see traffic between a VDR, for example, and an engine room PC, which you normally can't detect. NDR is very specific. You need specific hardware like spanning ports and all that kind of stuff. So it's not like a plug and play solution when you're going to implement such a solution. I think I will now hand over to Dave. So I will give you a proof. You can now share the screen.
Perfect. I think this is working great. So thank you, Yuri, for this, I think, very strong introduction of the IMO. And I hopefully can tell you a little bit more on how we see the threat landscape. But first of all, let me share with you that I am not a maritime expert. You are the maritime experts. But there is something the IMO actually tells me as somebody who is working in cybersecurity actually for all his life. And I think the IMO really says to us is we need to take this serious. That's what this regulation says. Not that you should be perfect, cannot make mistakes, or that never an incident is going to happen. It's saying take it serious, do it on a risk-based level. So I'm hoping I'm also talking to managers here, boardroom members, and not just the IT people, because they need the business to actually do a risk-based approach. And what the IMO tells me, the new regulations, they tell me it's a boardroom level discussion. And why is it a boardroom level discussion? And that's on the following paragraph that's in the actual cybersecurity guidelines. And it says, and I've highlighted, some cyber risks have wide-ranging destructive potential to the safety of personnel and the environment. So this is not just a IT party or a cybersecurity company. It's also about safety. It's also about global impact. As we have seen in 2017 with the WannaCry and NotPetya attacks, it requires leadership involvement to tackle these issues. And the best example I can give is also how many other industries are tackling this problem. So please, everyone, imagine the following situation. You're driving on this road around 100 miles per hour. And everything is going fine. The road is a little bit slippy and wet, but you're driving along fine. And then imagine the following situation. You're driving 100 miles an hour and everything actually goes to black. And you're still driving 100 miles an hour. And it's just a matter of seconds, minutes, before you actually are going to crash. This is the cybersecurity approach of most companies. They are blind to the risks right now, and they just keep going at full speed, the full digital transformation speed, not knowing when they're going to hit something. So it's actually time to turn on the lights, turn on the headlights, see what's happening there so you can adapt to the situation. And I think that's, again, what the IMO cyber regulation is going to tell us. We need to turn on our headlights, not on the car, but of course the cybersecurity risk program. So if we want to profit from all these digital transformation things going on, please, you have to be able to see the risks. And to see those risks, we need to turn on the headlights. Because if we're talking about risk, and I can give you a whole list, and Carl was talking also about phishing, social engineering, but I today just want to talk about one threat. And that threat is the threat of having a digital heart attack. And imagine your company getting a digital heart attack. Maybe you've heard in the Netherlands, there's currently a company, VDL, a very large manufacturing company, experiencing just that, a digital heart attack, and everything has stopped functioning. Well, most of the factories have. And of course, I'm talking about ransomware. But what I have learned when talking to boardroom members, a digital heart attack has much more emotion and implications of what a threat, what the risk of the threat actually is. So when talking about these digital heart attacks, ransomware, I can show you all kinds of different ransomwares and how it gets in, etc. But the main thing I wanted to show you with these slides is ransomware gangs are getting much more professional. They're not particularly very good or better than IT companies or better than defenders. It's just they're professional and they have one goal and they just need one access to get in. And you can see that from one of the gangs that we are tracking, like how their landing page looks. It has timers, it has countdowns, it has customer service portals, it has a gateway to help companies actually buy Bitcoin or other crypto exchanges. It has a trial decryption, so you can try and decrypt a file for free. These guys are professional, or girls, whatever. They are making hundreds of millions of dollars just trying to attack you. And they're not just causing you a digital heart attack. They're also stealing the data and publishing all the data that they have from companies as another leverage of sign of blackmailing. And you can see here how these kind of leak sites look. The data has been posted there and it's up for everyone to download. So the ransomware reality is it's not easy to do it with the standard risk matrix. Like for a fire or something destructive to happen, it's often high impact, but the low probability. And the problem with ransomware, the problem today is the impact is high and the probability is also very high. Because of the attack surface is growing, we have more systems connected to the internet. And therefore, there are more potential entry points. And I believe also in the shipping industry, digitization is actually gaining some traction there. So a digital heart attack, it also has stolen data, the potential of blackmail is there, and the odds are high. So ransomware is totally changing the game, actually. And just from an attacker's perspective, it's not really that advanced. An average attack consists of these three things. They get in, they get through the network, and they go out. And they still get in through the things we all know: outdated systems, weak passwords. Everyone has access to everything, sharing files, etc. So if you have one entry point, you can often go to the network. And there are no digital security cameras often. So when an attacker gets in, there's often no one watching the systems, what's going on. And controls have never been tested. So a lot of companies make a backup. But how many times do you actually test if the backup works and if the recovery process works? So the actual guidelines of the IMO, I have read through them all, and they are pretty darn good. And they rely on the NIST framework. And the NIST framework, I think it's pretty good. It starts with an identify phase, and the identify phase is not a cybersecurity phase. It's a business/IT phase. It's identifying who are we as a company? What is our business strategy? Where are our risks? And then you are going to protect the things that are important to you. So you do that with physical security, multi-factor authentication. Actually, if you can see this, these are the true basic protection measures that you should be making. And there are a lot more. But again, what Yuri said, talking to an MSSP, talking to the possibilities could help you bolster up to the protection phase. Then if you have set up the proper controls and protection, it's time to go to detect. Nothing is perfect, and perhaps they will find a system that's still outdated, was not in the asset management, and they get in your network. Then you need to do some form of monitoring on the endpoint, on the network, and somebody needs to look at those solutions. And that's exactly what an MSSP can do for you. Be those digital security cameras. And in the physical world, it's already pretty normal. We have 24/7 people watching the area, watching the ports, watching the ships, what's happening. And then, of course, the response phase. How do you do response? How do you react? Who do you call? What do you do? What do you don't do when there's ransomware? Do you shut down the systems? Do you pull it in the network cable, etc.? Really spend time responding and plan, and eventually plan to recover. How are you going to recover? And also do some key calculations. How many minutes or hours or days or weeks does it take us to recover? What does that cost us? And make sure you can do all these preparations beforehand. So to close up my end of this very short presentation, I think the conclusion is that the threat landscape is there is no silver bullet. We need to go through all the phases and implement some form of defense in depth. The criminals aren't good, they're professionals, so we should really focus on the fundamentals. And Mark is also going to talk about that. And the threats are the same, I think, for many industries, but the risks, the physical risks for you are very much different from other companies. So you need to implement this risk-based approach. And if you start talking to an MSSP, start talking about your business. And I think threats evolves. And this is the reason why the IMO wants to see, okay, why are you not taking this seriously? Or why are you taking this seriously? And it's a specialism. Cybersecurity is not IT. Cybersecurity professionals cannot build a network. So actually try and work with an MSSP. And I think this is the IMO in one slide. Start with the risk, build the policy, start seeing what kind of assets you have, map the controls you want on the NIST framework, and really plan for things that can actually go wrong. And I think an MSSP can help you setting up this organization security profile. It can help you manage these controls. They can do the patch management and see where there are vulnerabilities, and they can do the monitoring for you. You can have security meetings with them, trying to alter your posture and actually make the playbooks and set up the policy. So I think these are my key takeaways. Ransomware is also, I think, your biggest threat at the moment. Fundamental security is really the answer at the moment right now. And think about hiring an MSSP, and I think that's definitely the way to go. So please, Mark, go ahead and share your view.
Thank you, Dave. Let me see if I can take over the slides. Well, Dave, you talked a lot about all the threats and all the things you guys see in the cybersecurity space. Well, we also see a lot of things because we are SecWatch. We are ethical hackers. We are, as we say, the Robin Hoods of the cybersecurity world. As Dave said, there are a lot of things going wrong at companies, and we are testing those kind of things at companies and organizations. So we look like cyber threats from the perspective of a hacker. So we do just like Dave said, we try to get into networks and try to see how we can get access to networks and help our customers with that. We do that for like more than 100 pen tests a year. It's very important that we examine networks or software like a hacker or a hacker group, like hacker groups from China or from Russia, because that's the only way we can examine the network on the right way for the real, actually threats there are. We're going to look in environments and see what kind of things, what kind of pot of gold are there that is interesting to hackers. And we want to see if those kind of things are better protected than the rest. So looking for the risk and vulnerabilities in organizations, and for us and for our customers, is very important to know where are the threats with the highest impact, so you can take action to that. What do our customers get? Well, we perform a lot of tests, and they also want to have some results. So we make sure they get a step-by-step plan, including a priority and roadmap. What we mean with that is we get a list of quick fixes that they can do, so they are better protected than, let's say, yesterday. And we give a roadmap so they can put in technical and organizational measures for a long-term safe environment. So first the quick wins, and then a good roadmap to take further steps. With those advice, you can stay ahead of high impact threats. And we get an ultimate overview of threat intelligence for our customers. And that means against what kind of threats do this type of customers, organizations have to protect themselves to. And it's very important to not be under-secured or over-secured. You can buy a lot of technical fancy tools, but when it's not working for your organization, then it gives a false sense of security. Like I said, we do more than 100 pen tests a year, and there always are some key things that are going not so good. As Dave said, as Yuri said, we are repeating ourselves, but I think it's very important. The basic fundamentals are not implemented the right way. When you do, well, you win 80 or 90% of the battle. When we do a pen test, we are not blocked. So our guys getting into the network, and no endpoint security or other solution is blocking us from getting access to the network. There could be some fancy tools running, but when it's not configured properly or not actively managed, then the company is not getting the right measures to block us. So yeah, you can have some tools running, but when it's not good configured, yeah, we are going through the tools. And we are not noticed. Dave already said about monitoring. When we get into a network, we do things like a hacker does. We don't do usual IT work, but it's like you said, it's good normal practice in a network. But we do like hackers do. So we are jumping from server to server. We are reusing passwords. We are getting on segments that are not accessible, and yeah, that creates a false sense of security that you are not noticed that we are in the network. The hacker groups sometimes stay for months in a network to get full domain access control before they drop the ransomware. And very old vulnerabilities still work. Our Robin Hood hackers are just as lazy as the professionals. They always start with the old vulnerabilities, vulnerabilities from 2012. Well, why should you search longer in a network for vulnerabilities when the old ones always are ready to go? So our customers don't have insight into current and past vulnerabilities. And when we are in, we are really in. There is no segmentation at all. When we are in through a user account, we can uplift our rights to admin account. We can hop from maybe from vessel to vessel, from office to office, from segment to segment. When we are in, nothing's going to stop us. I also have some quick wins, and we are repeating ourselves because it's very important that you get the fundamentals right. I've wrote down a few, but there are I think eight or nine fundamentals, and the typical ones are use multiple authentication, use MFA, so you have a second. After a password, you have to sign in with an OTP, or you have to put on your smartphone, and you have to press the button that you are actually you, or you get an SMS code. Patch and update regularly. Yeah, we still get in via old vulnerable servers who are not patched or updated soon. You have to use robust endpoint security and firewalls. What I mean with robust, the standard antivirus is not working anymore. Every malware or ransomware is going to penetrate through that. You have to have to do some extra work to protect your network and your endpoints and your systems. And you have to implement them the right way. And I think that's something MSSP can really help. It's not just click and go. It has to be configured right the way it optimally helps the organization, and every organization is different, and you have to monitor the environment. So when something's happened, you have to fine-tune the security solutions. So it's just not one click and go. It's a continued process. Set a proper network segmentation. Yeah, well, we see it a lot that when we are in, like I said, we are always in. This is a very good defense in depth measure. When something happens, then it's only happening in one segment and not all your factories, like the VDL hack in the Netherlands. You have to segmentate different areas in your company. And yeah, monitoring your IT network. What is happening on the network? What is good behavior? What is bad behavior? And how can we learn from that? At board level, like the NIST framework, you have to ask your company, your stakeholders, some smart questions. So my advice is always get the stakeholders together and take a notepad and ask yourself, do we actually know what our risks are? and what are the real threats to our organization. And a threat for an oil company is different than the local butcher. Like Dave said, I think the ransomware threat is there for everyone. It's good to know what your business critical data is. What kind of data you can't work without? Do you know where it stands? Do you know how it's protected? Do you know who can access it? And are too many employees accessing it, the information? Which business processes and suppliers do we depend upon? It's very good to have an overview of your business processes that have to work like 24/7. And when it's not working, do you know which kind of suppliers you can depend upon? Is there software that you use? Well, when it's not working, who can you call? So make a call list, and when you can't use the software more than 4 hours and you have a big problem, well, you make sure that you have an agreement with the software company that they react within 4 hours. So make a simple overview, if you can, about the suppliers and the processes you use and where you depend upon. And important, we can't hide or run for ransomware. So the chance that somebody gets hit from a ransomware or another kind of incident is very, very, very large. So how do you respond? Who do you call? Like Dave said, is the backup in place? Can we have we tested the backup that's on the right way, so that we know that the backup works? You can ask yourself all type of questions to make sure you act the right way when an incident happens, and prepare yourself for that, because, well, I'm afraid it's going to happen someday. And the better you respond, the better you can mitigate the risks. Wow, I think that's it.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, Mark. That's fascinating. I think that's a great understanding of what we're doing. So we're now going to the Q&A part of the session. So I invite everybody to load your questions up. I can see we've got 4 already. If I could just ask everyone to keep the answers short, maybe just a minute or so. Just got one warm-up question I can't resist asking, Mark. So if I was a ship owner, I'd be absolutely paranoid about employing you, because maybe you're going to hack into the navigation systems or engine or something like that. How is that? Have you got a way to make sure that doesn't happen?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, we scope the test, so we make sure we only test, and we are not trying to pull something from each other. So it's always an assessment we do together with our customers. It's the customers knows their vessel and their network the best, so we can help them. Where can we get the good results so you can take action? And yeah, we're not trying to do that kind of things, Carl.
Oh, okay. And then I've noticed we've got 3 questions on penetration tests already. So Julian Gaunt, who I think is a cybersecurity consultant in France, he's asking, do you start off with some internal knowledge? And then he asks, is it the pen test the best tool? Wouldn't you be better off doing an audit of the architecture? And then Jonathan is asking, do you go on board to do the penetration test, or do you do it all remotely? Maybe so some good questions there, aren't they? Maybe start with Mark and then bring in the others.
Yeah. And on board is preferably the best way to go, because that's a real life situation, and you want to know the threats of a real life situation. And I know that's not always an option. So sometimes we do it when the ship is in a harbor. And yeah, it has to do with a lot of strategic and good planning with you guys. So that, yeah, there are good possibilities. And when you do one vessel, you can take the advice probably to another vessels, so you can strengthen your cybersecurity techniques with one.
Yeah, well, what we see often on those vessels when there are pen testing or companies are being pen tested, because we get the question as well, it's like, okay, do you have a typical layout of your vessel, what kind of operating system. And if Windows XP is popping up on the list and Windows 7, then we first say to the company, before you're going to order a pen test with any company, make sure you're at the latest operating system, have applied your system updates. Because if you do a pen test, make it hard for those companies to do that actual pen test, because then it brings you the value. It does not make sense to have a report saying, oh, you have to upgrade Windows XP and you need to update Windows 7. And yeah, we saw that there was a Exchange server running on the vessel and there was no network segmentation running. Oh yeah, and by the way, your antivirus is end of life. So those are the things those are the real quick wins when you order a pen test. Make sure you get almost to done before ordering that, so that you can actually do those final tweaks after that. And then basically get worthwhile of your money.
Carl, if I could add to that, what you could do is actually have the pen test help you prioritize things. So what I love about scoping the pen testing of SecWatch is actually you can say as a ship owner, well, this is my worst case nightmare. Please test this scenario, maybe get to this data or alter X system. And then the pen test company can actually show you what the quickest route is and where you should put your focus on fixing first. So of course, do not test everything when everything is still really, really in a bad shape. But pen testing could help you prioritize some things.
Oh, that's great. So we've got three interesting questions already. One about aviation, one about social engineering, and one about IoT. I don't know which one we go for first. Maybe should we go back to Yuri and well, if you want to choose one of those questions to answer. So Peter's asking, what have we learned about aviation to make a secure IT environment? And Shailendra is asking about Internet of Things security.
Well, I think about aviation, I think Dave can possibly answer that, because I know that ESET has been working with aviation companies. So
yeah, sure. Yeah, as I said, I'm not a maritime expert, but I know Yuri for a long time, so I have some sense of how the industry works. And I think from this is just a one man's opinion, there has not much been learned from the aviation when it really comes to incident sharing on a cybersecurity perspective. So of course you can imagine for their cybersecurity it's actually a flying computer. So if it goes wrong, people die, and that's in the aviation industry. So what I know, what they are doing is their incident sharing has totally crossed every commercial boundary. So whenever something happens to one aviation company, it's immediately shared to all the others. The security professionals know each other, they talk to each other, and of course, it could probably improve, but what they have done, created this center of excellence. Reporting is really incentivized. Actually, it's punished if you have not actually reported something that has gone wrong. So I think what the aviation industry is doing, I think the maritime industry could definitely learn some things from how to do it.
Oh, we've got a one-up vote from this some sort of fellow countryman, Martin Roast, social engineering. So I guess this is the main way these phishing attacks happen. I know shipping companies have seen a lot of this when people actually manage to sound like you're one of your customers on email. I don't know which of you would like to.
Well, I can start maybe sharing my opinion, because I know I have an outspoken opinion about this. So Martin, please also listen to other experts, not just me. I don't think awareness is useless, but I think, as Yuri said, it's the life buoy. It should be one of your last resorts. I think what you should really invest in is making sure there are guardrails in place, because I think it's pointless what we are doing right now. Training people not to click, not to open attachments. It's actually their job to open attachments. It's their job to click on links and URLs. So of course it cannot hurt to talk them to the basics and keep talking to them, and so involve them in the security program, I believe. But it is going to happen that one day they will click. And I think then it's important to have segmentation, to have good endpoint security, and have those guardrails in place, so that what I would say is still the fundamentals are also going to help you a great deal in handling social engineering.
Yeah. We've all seen these ones where people try and get your username and password. They send you an email that looks like it's coming from your boss. So I guess the only way for security then is this multi-factor authentication, isn't it?
Of course, it's good to talk to your people that these things can happen, but sometimes phishing emails are so sophisticated, especially in targeted attacks, and some of them are quite easy to recognize. But I think we should put less focus on having people not click and have more focus on the scenario that they are going to click and how are we going to protect them and our systems.
Yeah, I think that Mark told me once before that, like, okay, when they do a pen test, it's like we all train people not to click on links, but it's also important to know what happens when you click on a link. Because if you can click on the link and your network is protected against going to those websites or anything like that, then, well, they can click anything they want, but the ransomware or the attacker can't breach the system. So that's the other way around. And I also saw some questions of how to protect IoT, and I think that's in combination with how to protect the yachting. There are actually two questions about that. Sure, yachting is a simple network, but most often the visitors on a yacht are high-profile customers. So meaning in their company, they are a big CEO, pop star, or you name it. Have all the security tools in place, UTMs, NDR, whatever you need, security center, and then they go on holiday on a trip for a week or 2 weeks, and they are on a yacht and they connect their laptop to a Wi-Fi network that they don't control. So the question is, will the yachting manager be responsible for any kind of breach? And I think the quick wins on that are really easy to do based on UTMs and NDRs to actually monitor the network traffic. Because you can't say to your guests, you need to install this application, but you can limit the connections that they can actually go to. And that's just a proper implementation of security tools. And then also, of course, keep that monitoring, because the good things on yacht is that there are proper satellite connections available to actually do proper monitoring. And that's the same with when you're going to do IoT security management. The problem is with IoT, you can't install an endpoint security solution often on it, either due to regulations, because like an Actis is a Windows machine, but you're not allowed to install any endpoint security on it, but you need to keep it updated. But also a VDR, what's happening? Well, within the network, you need a tool to actually, a camera system, as Dave actually briefly talked about, to see what's happening between those two devices. But if you are recording that, who is monitoring that traffic? Are there any lines, any alerts set out when it goes out of band, for example? So yeah, that's basically in providing the tools and do the monitoring. It's not an install and forget that we had 10 years ago. We install an antivirus, it keeps updating, everything's okay. No, we're far beyond that point.
Got 2 upvotes for this top question about ISO 27001. Is it easy to answer this one as a short answer? Do you advise companies do it, or is it practical advice is actually far more useful? Does anybody know about?
I can go short. I think yes. I think the ISO, it's not easy. On the other hand, it's very complete. It's risk-based. A lot of people complain about ISO, but if you do it well, if you do it properly, if you're motivated, it's actually a pretty good framework. So I would say yes, go for it. It would be my dream if all companies would have a good functioning security program.
Yeah, I agree with that, because it's really, how do you call it? When you're doing the ISO, we also are ISO certified. You're actually taking a look at your own equipment, at your own processes, how to deal with them, and that's actually one of the first, pillars in the NIST framework, IMO framework. Identify what you have. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we come back to Mark, we've got another question on penetration testing. I think you've got a lot of interest here. So if you're hacking a vessel, you're going to do that over the satellite communication link. I think you may have touched on this before, but it looks like there's we're getting into a vessel remotely, or we're doing it over
yeah, it depends on the situation, and when it has to be done right now, we have to use the satellite communication, and when we can do it, we can plan it, then it's better to do it in the port. But yeah, it's depending on the situation, on the risks, and on the planning of the customer, and yeah, we can do it all different ways.
It's a very different risk if you're actually on board. I mean, somebody told me once that we trust the crew not to put rags in the engine, and well, there's a lot of things we trust the crew with. And if you can hack a computer on board, that's very different to be able to hack it remotely, isn't it? It's different.
Yeah, correctly, but yeah, and many times everything is remoteable, remote accessible, so we can access it. It's remote. So when somebody in your environment can get access to it, the hackers can access to it also. But when we are on the vessel, we are sitting side by side with our customers, and they can ask my colleagues a lot of things. So they learn a lot of more when you're sitting side by side. They can ask questions. They see how a hacker thinks. So they before they get a report, they already think, oh, I have to implement this kind of things, or I have to ask this, or maybe it's better to do that. So that's it's the best way to you have to do it together, but when you're sitting side by side, it's the best way to get the message through there.
Okay, should we go to Andy Chin's question? So he's talking about computers on board which are not connected to any network. So they could be a ECDIS with a lot of regulation, or it could be some seafarer using a Windows XP laptop, I suppose. Does it need to be scrutinized for cybersecurity pen tests as well? Maybe for Yuri, do you want to talk about your experiences with standalone PCs?
Well, we often actually see still the Windows XP, the standalone machines, and the problem with those standalone machines is that if there's no security tool installed on it, they bring back their USB drive and then connect it to that machine, and then basically it goes wrong. So sure, if it's a real, how do you call it, disconnected machine that only has one task and will never be touched, then you could approach it a bit differently. But basically, even if it's disconnected, you should make sure that there are security rules set up, such as, how do you call it, only user access, no administration access. Have your security application, even is local, updated. And especially for ECDIS, that's a real difficult one because you're not allowed to install it. So basically, in that point, regulation is running into a wall because they need to update the charge, but they're not allowed to connect it directly to the internet. So how do you update it with a USB? But that USB can be used on every machine in the network. So we have seen already a couple of times that those ECDIS machines were infected. So yeah, it's from my opinion, basically it would be treated as you would do every PC in your network.
David says you raised your hand. Is that this?
Yeah, I could maybe combine also with the IoT question. I think much of everything we're talking about today really comes down to visibility. Because if you cannot see it, you cannot protect it. That was also the analogy what I wanted to do with the headlights. And I think that also is true for IoT. If you are willing to connect it, you've got to be willing to protect it. And a lot of these fundamentals are also applied to IoT security or standalone. Asset management, know that you actually have it. Put visibility in place whenever possible. So if it is possible to put an AV client on it, do it, because it then shows up an inventory list, it's connected. For IoT, try to segment it properly, have NDR, know that it is there, and know what the normal patterns are. So I think a lot of it comes down to visibility and try to see all the assets that are there. So still, again, fundamentals.
Okay, so we've got three very meaty questions here. So I don't know if anybody has interesting questions. Chris Henney is asking about, so keeping with this security reporting, there's still no place on the internet I can find out about cyber incidents on ships anonymously. It's still incredibly secret. So maybe you've got some thoughts to share on this. Martin is asking how you think cloud compares with on-premise hosting in a security perspective, because some people say cloud is a lot better and some people say it's exactly the same problem. Shailendra is asking about Ais spoofing. You might not know about Ais if you're not maritime people, when you sort of it's like a faking a ship transponder. So I don't know if you'd like to choose.
I can choose. If we take the question of Marta, you can approach it two ways. The problem with maritime is that cloud hosting is not always possible due to bandwidth. We had a terrific webinar, or another webinar actually on-site, the first digital ship in Greece, and they talked also about cloud hosting. The problem with that is that the satellite connections can't keep up if you're going to share a lot of data. The advantage of cloud hosting to on-prem hosting is basically that you're outsourcing it to a party that needs to get it to keep it updated. And sure, those parties can be structured well. If we look to Microsoft SolarWinds, the Kaseya hack, and so on. But then you have a team running to get it updated. What often happens with on-premise hosting is that you need your own IT personnel to keep it up to date, keep tracking it down, and really, okay, did we apply the patch? So it will cost you more at the end. So it's basically, it's like, it's the way where we go. And sure, like cloud hosting is just somebody else's PC, as we always say. but it will give you more peace of mind when it's done properly.
Mark, I think you were saying something. Were you?
Yeah, about the Ais spoofing, we're not a maritime experts. It's like a connection, so you can see where the vessel is right at the moment. When there is a connection, we can test the connection. If something is wrong with the connection, it's not using the right encryption standards or something like that. So this could be a question in the pen test, like Dave said. Where are your risks at the moment? And then you can scope the pen test. And if this is your biggest risk, then we have to look technically to it and to see if everything is configured right.
Okay, so if you go to the next three questions, Wei Ho is asking the most popular tools and apps with multi-factor authentication. That sounds like a bit too broad to maybe tackle here. I don't know. Martin Brost is asking what happens when we get much faster internet speeds, and Kanar Bine has just gone to the top of the list with role-based logins on ships, which break the rule of every cyber framework. Maybe Yuri, you'd like to talk about Connor's question first as a maritime-specific issue. So I guess when people have a master's login, so rather than logging under their own name, is it something you see quite a lot on ships?
Well, the problem is they actually never use role-based logins on the ships. That's the biggest problem. One of the things that we often see, and I think that's more a quick win as well, is when one of our engineers boards the vessel. And when I back in the day was an engineer, nobody walked with me through all the PCs. It was like, you need to install something on the engine room. Just walk down to the engine room, just all the way down, and you will find it yourself. So there is no security on that part. And that's actually a quick win. Just ask the company that's attending your vessel, what type of data did you copy? And that's part of the ISO actually as well, is like we have to say, okay, when we, in one of our protocols is when we leave a vessel that we delete all the data that we actually copied, that we have no copy of the data that was on the vessel. So those are the quick win. I know that on vessels, it's the management part is a bit difficult with role-based login, but it's actually how it should be. Why should every user be an administrator to install the software? Because from our experience and what we see in our security operating center, when we monitor, all the machines that are not protected with basic user authentication have all different programs installed, to say it nicely, and have all the, how do you call it, the most threats because they install everything, and those are the machines that always give the issues. And if we look to a network that actually has authentication, saying you have a user right, you can't install any software, so you have the company, you need to call the company. We actually never hear those vessels that they have any issue. So it's a very, very good and quick win, but it's the keeping, how do you call it, keeping tied to the what we are used to in the industry.
Dave?
I think, Connor, you're like spot on here. This might be the number one thing why when criminals get in, they can do everything they want. And the problem is also, if you want to recover from an incident and do the investigation, the forensics, it's really hard to tell what happened, who accessed what, and the what and the how. I wish there was a shortcut for this, but it's just like, okay, just do it. And I think convincing the board, convincing the IT people that this is actually a very good starting point. So I would also like to add, it's also the security mindset, culture, taking things serious. If you take cybersecurity serious, this might be one of the main areas to start with, Connor. I think you're spot on here.
You're kind of disagreeing with each other. Don't know if I hear you. You really thought role-based login is a good idea and Dave thinks it's a bad idea, did I?
No, I can't remember actually I said that. I said Connor is spot on. This is the number one thing what goes wrong when attackers get there. So if you should focus some of your attention, do this. But I think it's a security mindset culture. Take it serious and just do it. Implement role-based login. So no, I'm 100% for this.
Okay, we're in favor of. So you think the next master comes on, he uses the same login as the previous master, I suppose. You don't know.
I think that's disastrous for security. Also, what I talked about in research and recovering from an incident, you can never tell what happened. So if you want to start somewhere, this is definitely a role-based login. If you can implement it, definitely that's something, great area to start in.
Not only for an incident, Dave. Also, when something happens, somebody did something not the right way. Well, you want to see who was that person, not to kick him in the nuts, but to learn from it. From okay, this went wrong. Do it another way. And when you are all logging with one master authorization, then you can't see where it goes wrong during an incident, after an incident.
Yeah, an auditor mainly wants to see stuff like this. So this is definitely going to be a problem if you have an auditor and you can't tell who did what and what happened. So
I think we got a consensus. So role-based logins are better than general logins, but individualized logins are maybe better than a general role-based login, is that?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, should we go to Vasilios Mavrofridis? How do you test OT equipment? Can you hack into an engine? Crikey, that's a big one for 5 minutes left. But should we go to Mark for this one? Have you ever hacked into a piece of operational technology?
No, they don't allow us to do that.
I think they would.
The two things we can do. Is it good segmented from the other networks? So how do you get access to the OT network? Are there firewalls in place and network segmentation? Are there technical measurements that protect the OT environment from the other environment? And we don't pen test OT environments, but we mainly look at how it's built up. So we ask questions, we sit beside the technical guys from how does it build up and what kind of measurements do you have in place and how do you do the patching. So actually pen testing or do an assessment on OT stuff, that's not what we do, because the risk that it's going break something, that's more risk than maybe it get hacked. So that's not something you want to do. But you can get some good results just looking at the environment and asking the questions and seeing if the access to the OT environment is good protected.
Oh, Dave.
Yeah, I think the first part of the question, yes, OT is included in the IMO cybersecurity regulations. If you download the annex file, and it really goes also into this type of thing of the roles we just talked about, it talks about OT, etc. So yes, it's definitely a part. And I think what Yuri talked about is very interesting for OT, network detection and response. And you have specific OT solutions that don't like actively scan or put anything in trouble. They're just listening and analyzing the network traffic. So I think if you want to protect OT technology or OT, it's actually a very good thing to implement NDR and look for the anomalies and see if it's doing anything wrong. And there are very good solutions for that.
Okay, well, we have about 3 minutes left. We've got about 3 meaty maritime questions. I thought maybe if Yuri, if you want to try and take all these 3 together, and then I guess we'll finish. So Siva is asking, have you seen any security problems with hotspots and Bluetooth on board? Chris Haney is asking if we recommend control over USB ports, and Andreas is asking, maybe a shipping company has a very good reason for using a Windows XP computer, such as it's got some old software that they really depend on. What do you recommend?
No, yeah, sure. Like, well, first, like that, pick the one of Chris Henny. Well, the USB port, sure, the CRM has an updated procedure for maintenance and all that kind of stuff. But the problem with USB ports, like many security applications, can actually block USB ports, or you can say, I only want to allow this vendor USB to be allowed. The problem with that is that USB is still allowed in other PCs. So you will put it in a crew laptop, then it's infected, you put it back into a machine, and then, oh, this USB drive is allowed. And then hopefully your security application will actually detect that virus. So yeah, USB always a tricky thing. And that's pure based on awareness training, saying to the crew member, you can only put it in those 2 machines, but it's a real difficult one. The other one, Bluetooth hotspots and wireless. Yeah, that's also a thing. The crew wants to have internet very quickly. So when they come into port, they want to connect to the vessel or to the port Wi-Fi. And then with that, you have basically a pipe, a tunnel, which is not controlled. And then NDR kind of solutions basically come in saying, okay, we see network that should not be there. So yeah, you should actually limit the opportunities for the crew members to connect additional hotspots. We have seen it before. We have seen detection of hotspots, and then the company goes like, we don't have any Cisco hotspots. We use a different brand, for example. And then they actually see that the crew members just plug in their own hardware to connect to shore. At the other one of Andreas is, well, yeah, if the vendor does not exist anymore, then the company should actually take an approach to replace that product. Staying on Windows XP, because there is a single product, you can always think about virtualizing that Windows XP machine, put it on a hypervisor, which is running a more updated OS, and only use it for that specific feature. But eventually you need to update anyhow. You can't stay there for 5 or 10 years longer. So keeping fixed to that, no, yeah, it's working only in XP. We have seen it before, that kind of mentality, but you should search for another solution. It's no longer an option to stay at an old dated OS.
Wow.
Yeah, or segment it.
Yeah, or segment it in a way that it's really blocked off of the network.
Yeah, and monitor every bit that's going to through those machines. So you have to make extra security measures when you can't replace it. And yeah, the best advice is replace it. But you when it's an accepted risks, then you have to segment it from the rest of the network, and yeah, make sure you see every traffic going through there. And when something bad is going to happen, you can hit the stop button.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we're at the end of our time here. I thought I'd just read out Connor Byrne's question, because or it's more a comment about, it's always useful to know about hacks. So he's heard about an Ais attack. Somebody managed to hack the onboard transponder, which showed the ship as a 1 kilometer square on everybody else's ECDIS systems, I suppose, which set off their crash collision systems on the other ECDIS. There's another project we've been involved about the problems with alarm systems on navigation systems. As somebody made a recommendation, they're more problem than benefit, but that's maybe food for thought another day. But we've had the largest audience we've ever had at a digital ship webinar today, so thanks everyone, and I'll pass back to Vida. Cheers. You're on mute.
Yes, I know. So great thanks to Yuri, Mark, and Dave for sharing high-level advice on how to approach IMO cybersecurity guidelines very practically, actually. And yes, as Carl said, we observed 195 of you watching this webinar, and I think you get out more aware on the risk and will be more equipped to ask smart questions in your organizations to improve your security. We have a few interesting webinars planned in October. Check them on webinars.thedigitalship.com, and we are signing off until next week. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye
Thank
now.
you, everyone. Take care.